This is so great. Thank y'all for being here. I'm excited.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nugo Tay, Creative Director of Deem Journal, and this is our second forum. We're super excited because part of what we try to do with Deem is move beyond just the printed matter and the digital matter that we produce and find ways to be in community. Obviously, due to the current restrictions in the world, being in community shows up in different ways. And we actually found that the forum allows us to extend past our ethos in print and start bringing in the community members that we've been working with to extend the dialogue and extend the content. And so we're really excited for this forum that's anchored in our new issue, Pedagogy for a New World, which we're really starting to look at what does knowledge exchange mean, how does education start to facilitate liberation. And so this is the first of 3 conversations. This one I'm very excited for, and you also should be very excited for, that's really focused around rest and how is rest a liberatory act, and how are we facilitating rest in our practice. And so with no more further ado, I am going to step away. But before I do that, I wanted to let everyone know that we do have closed captions available. The link will be in the bio of the YouTube page. So I am going to introduce the moderator, Jessica Lynn, and she is going to take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jess. I'm a writer, critic, co-founder of Arts.Black and Arts Journal, publishing Black critics. Today, I'm in my living room. I'm wearing a white and blue striped button-up with a blue bucket hat and a yellow smiley face, and I have some blue cornrows. Feeling really blue today. I'm really thankful to be in conversation with my 2 esteemed co-panelists. And before we begin and get into the conversation, I'd like to invite them to tell you a little bit about themselves.
I can go first.
That'd be great.
Hi, everybody. My name is Camera. I use they, them pronouns. I am a musician and also the founder of Activation Residency, which is a Black trans-led artist residency experiment located in Woodridge, New York. We have been going for 3 years now. It'll be the 4th year this year, and we're dedicated to activating the creative practices of all artists. I'm currently in my living room in Prospect Heights. I am wearing round seeing glasses. I have 2 nose rings, a short, beautiful afro, and I'm wearing a white tank top with my feet kicked up on the desk.
Hi, everyone. My name is Antonia Stella Perez. I'm currently joining you all from Esopus territory, in the Catskill Mountains along the Esopus Creek. And I am the founder of Urban Cura, a knowledge sharing organization where we host different knowledge shares around ancestral practices and herbal medicine, as well as offer plant-dyed garments and herbal medicine. And that was founded in New York City about 5 years ago. I'm currently wearing a white shirt, cross-legged on this wooden chair next to a Van Gogh painting, wearing a silver necklace and brown, black straight hair. Thank you.
Thank y'all. So this afternoon, we're going to spend about 45 minutes talking and discussing and thinking through rest and care and all of the many related ideas. But before we started that, I wanted to open up with a reading of a Lucille Clifton poem because it felt to me really connected to both of y'all's work, but I think all of the larger questions and inquiries that I hope we'll get into today. So if you don't mind indulging me for a few seconds, I'm going to open us with Won't You Celebrate With Me by Lucille Clifton. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight, my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and failed. So yes, the great ancestor Lucille. And I want to just dive in. Thanking both of you all again for your work and for the constellation of community that you create, cultivate, and sustain. And in the spirit of care and rest, especially after perhaps one of the more explicit years of crisis. I don't say new crisis because many of us are managing crisis all the time. I'm thinking a lot about what has opened for us, what may have opened for you as it relates to conditions of rest. So to start, I wanted to ask, what is rest for you meaning in this moment? How has your understanding of that term both evolved and changed personally, but perhaps given the spirit of community that you all are connected to, has there been any changes and reimaginings of rest as it relates to the people with whom you're in community with and with whom you're building? And either one can take it first.
I'd like to start. I might ask you to repeat the second question.
Yes.
Okay. The first thing that's on my mind is I'm currently 4 weeks out on testosterone. And so that part of me wants to say, like, it's not that deep, just lay down. But I think that the larger piece of it is rest has come to symbolize relief for me. And I'm thinking a lot about like what it is to be in relief and like what feels relieving. And those moments and spaces are where I feel most rested. So for example, kissing makes me feel so relieved. Like when you've been like building up, and as a fully vaccinated person, I now feel like really good about kissing. But when you're like building up connection with someone in tension, then you finally have that moment where you connect skin to skin and like your body just kind of melts. It's like that feels restful because of the somatic experience of relief. And prior to the pandemic, that's not a perspective that I had because I was working 40 hours a week for an art fair, and it was just such grueling work, and lost my job because of the pandemic, and really had to like think critically about how I wanted to move through the world and how I wanted my work to appear in the world. And so I went from working 40 hours a week to now going on like luxurious, like retreat forward trips upstate at a friend's 65-acre parcel of land. And doing that all the while, like looking at properties for Farming Futurity, which is Activation's permaculture design project. So it's really cool to see like when you cultivate like slowness and more space, you can really develop a relationship with work that isn't rooted in exploitation and capitalism. And so I think, yeah, just being really grounded in rest as relief has been really powerful for me.
Thank you for that. And Sonia, how are you feeling and thinking about rest? And how has that understanding changed for you, if at all?
I love that rest as relief. Segueing from that, I feel that space of relief. I felt it yesterday when I was actually in a space of spiraling and like, I'm so overworked, I'm so stressed, I'm feeling really anxious, like very much in this spring season, like farming right now, and farming with that vision of liberation and feeding folks that are incarcerated and low income Black and brown people, and just it being the first year and like there's so much to do, and we're behind, and like, okay, we have these ideals and values of like, we're moving towards liberation, but also how is that existing in like the way that we're working? And that's like not in full resonance right now, because it's like, well, we have these commitments, and we have um, you know people that are relying on us. And so I was in this space of like, oh my God, I'm like not feeling in like resonance with myself, and I'm not feeling in my respect to myself, as like I started bleeding the day before, and I worked really hard, like planting all these potatoes and onions, and it was just like my body was speaking loud, like lay down, lay down. And like I took moments of laying down, but also the space of like, but everyone else is working, I need to like keep going, and being with the team. And so I speak all of that because I feel that my relationship to rest is constantly like, I'm kind of constantly spiraling in and out of like, okay, I find like my relief here, but then in that urgency of like, there's so much to do for liberation, and like constantly creating and manifesting, that I then get back into that wheel of like, we gotta go, go, go. And it's like, wait, the body, the spirit is also screaming loud of like, no, like also spring is about seeing everything blooming and enjoying like the honeysuckles that are out and the lilacs that are still so fragrant. And so in that spiral yesterday, I had two friends call me that were gonna meet up to hang out by the Woodland Valley Creek that runs into the Sopus. And I was kind of sharing where I was at, and they're like, you need to come right now. Like, I don't care, just like come. And I was like, okay, but I gotta go to the farm first and do this and that. And they're like, all right, do what you gotta do, but just come. And I came, and like, it was a space where I could feel the spiraling that I was in, but being held by the water and this ancient rock that's like sits in the middle of this creek, and be with friends that are affirming like a little bit what you said, Cameron, like how do we embed rest into the work that we're doing so that we move at a pace that is actually building something that's going to last, and like that's embedded into the culture that we're creating in everything, like especially if it's a liberatory vision that we're working towards. So
I want to follow up and ask Antonia something. Just even hearing you talk for like 2 minutes, I feel that you have a very refined relationship with the land and the earth. And I'm curious, like when you were going through that spiral, like what was, if any, what was your conversation with the land yesterday?
Yes, thank you for that. I feel in the moment of that spiral, the conversation was like muted. I was just like not in conversation with the land. I was in conversation like with my body. And so like the invitation from my dear friends was like, come and commune with the land to like remind you where you are, and to like get out of this space and to remember like everything is flowing and moving right now. And sometimes when we're in these moments of like this crisis, it is so real, and it's like we're having a very real somatic experience. And also how can we be held or place ourselves where we can be in dialogue. And so the conversation I was having in the water was just like, at first like so loud in my head, and then seeping into like hearing the water just speaking so loud, and how that was changing, and listening to the birds. And I heard one of my favorite birds, veeries, who I've been waiting like all season, like when are the veeries gonna come back? And my friend was like, I think that's a veery now. And like the birds coming up and approaching us and hanging out with my little friend who's 7, and just like being in that space where I just laid down for a moment once they all left, and I was just like in that liminal space of my voices are not loud anymore, and I'm just allowing myself to feel held and safe in this space, even though I was like, I hope no one else comes through right now. Like, but yeah, I think that I felt deep relief in that moment of just being able to surrender to the land.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really appreciate that follow-up question, Camera. And I think what I'm hearing from both of you is what it means to renegotiate time in our relationship to time. And I think for me, that renegotiation of time is also in relationship to how the communal shows up, right? Cameron, you talked about leaving a 40-hour, probably more work week, right? And kind of retreating with comrades and friends. Antonia, you as well, talking about the spiral and how it was a collective and a communal, both human and non-human spirits, right? That kind of ushered you into this different pacing. I want to know if either both of you could talk a little bit about. I have a dog. Excuse me. Speaking of the communal, if both of you could spend some time sharing with us how the invitation into the communal anchors your practice and your work, and maybe even more in a more romantic way, where you first saw that type of gesture modeled, one that I consider to be quite political, in fact, right? A resistance of a vertical orientation of hierarchy. I'm curious to know how you first saw that practice modeled, and why a communal orientation really feels central to who you are and what you do.
Antonia, do you have a preference?
I feel like I just spoke a lot, so if you're feeling excited to go, you can go, or whatever you feel.
So I've been thinking a lot about this, and I feel like because of the natural landscape and the coming together of activation residency, it gets aestheticized as a community when really it's a service. And it takes, one person can't build community, right? So I feel like in my grappling with how to talk about activation residency and what it is and what it does, I've had to get really clear about the fact that it's not a community. Community maybe comes out of it. But I found community in like the people who drop off food at my house when, you know, I've just had top surgery, the people that I have sex with, the people that like fill my home with flowers, like the people that ask me how my mom's doing after she got out of the hospital. Like that is what community feels like for me. And a lot of that is rooted and wrapped up in my own personal journey towards having a healthier relationship with communication and accountability. So coming from like a family of abusers and not even knowing what harm, accountability, or communication really is, and having to like relearn and reteach myself how to be in right relationship with myself so I can be in right relationship with other people. And I was just telling my therapist this today, but one of the like primary observances that I'm experiencing in my life right now is I'm noticing that like me having all my needs met and caring for myself is translating into me being like the healthiest, best lover I can be to all of my beloveds and comrades. And like, if there is one single gift in the world that I would want, it's that. And so I was joking to my therapist, I'm like, where do I go from here? Because like, I just feel like I've done the thing, like I'm in the thing. And so, yeah, I think like, community, like being, you know, sort of like the central piece, and then like accountability and right relationship being its wings are the things that have like really helped me be rooted in communal care, and be rooted in like, if someone comes to me being like, hey, you caused harm, I need space, being able to hold that for them. Yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm so happy that you're in that space right now. That's so good. I'll start with where I saw that modeled, or that conversation from first my mom and my dad coming to this country as immigrants, and having grown up in community where like very strong community, like a lot of, you know, every week family coming together and or supporting each other to build homes, or like, you know, help each other on the land. And there's a concept in Andean cosmology and philosophy of Aini, which is essentially mutual aid of like, you help me, I help you, or like a concept of a work party. Like we all come and work, on your project, and then we go work, we reciprocate, that idea of reciprocity. And when my parents came here, like they would ask their neighbors, like, do you like see them painting their house or whatever, and like, do you need help? And they'd be like, no, we got it. Then be like, why is everyone so like afraid of receiving help, or like support, and like just that like everyone being so individualistic. So my parents be like, we'd all be able to get this done so much more joyfully and efficiently if like we supported each other. So I could see the kind of like the disillusion in my parents, and just being in this country and seeing like the lack of care for people and like the fear around care. Like, I don't know you, or like you're like not having kind of the neighborly relations that they had in their homelands. But I think having grown up in that family where we like we're our only kind of support of care, those are ideals that I've kind of carried with me of like, yeah, we do get so much done when we have a work party. Like my friend Manda and I, whose home I'm in right now, like we started, we got a garden done in like 5 work parties, this like amazing garden, and so many beautiful people came through. And it was like, wow, like we just like there's a fucking garden now, like if it had just been like Mandana's family and I and a few other people, like we could have gotten it done, but like maybe it would have taken longer. And it's not so much like the length of time, but it was like the joy that we felt, and like the drums that our friend Kula brought with her brothers, and like not that everyone was there working, but that there was space for people to also hang out and play, and like everything was happening, like actually living up to the party part of a work party. And I forgot the other part of the question, but that's what's coming up for me.
I think you answered it. You're not right, like articulating kind of where first models were given to you, and then how it translates now. And I think it's great to stick and think through care some more, because as we all know, there are many definitions of what care can be, right? And I think there are many instances where care as it shows up in a market context is embodied by like a certain type of consumption, and a certain type of perhaps capitalist indulgence, right? And then there, I think, are other, and I don't use this word lightly, radical experiences of care, where we're thinking about a liberatory pleasure, as both of you all have named. And so in that way, I want to talk a bit more about how you understand the tenets of care. What is that to you precisely? Is it work? Like, does it include and inscribe accountability, communication, as you said earlier, Camera? And are you ever worried about the entanglement of care as work? Because I think that you do show up in a certain type of work, and there's a certain type of labor that happens for people that you love, right? When there's a need, and in order to kind of make sure those folks have the things that they need. But I am worried about the slippage between care as work and work as care. And I'm wondering if you all can help me unpack that a little bit, what your thoughts are around that. Mostly because I don't have a definitive answer, and I'm interested in how you all are thinking about that tension.
So the first thing that's coming up for me is that the most profound and consistent tenet of care for me is consent, and not just consent of like checking in, but consent in like a language, a framework for moving through the world. I started taking consent and boundary classes with an instructor, an intimacy coordinator in LA. Their name is Mia, last year. And I did that for about a year. And I think the education around giving and receiving and also taking, because a lot of us care workers, we give, but we have a lot of misalignment around taking, and taking is seen as something that's like something you shouldn't do, even though it's a part of the process of being in care and relationship with people. And so the reason why I'm okay with care and work being in relationship is because I'm very proud of my care work. I'm very proud of the way that I care about people, and I'm proud of the way that I am cared for. And the reason why I can care so well is because I've had to learn skills. Like, I've literally had to be in Zoom rooms crying with other Black trans people, figuring our shit out, like really doing the work. I know that phrase is so played out after last year. And it's work that I'm proud of. It's work that enhances my capacity. It doesn't deplete me of my capacity. And it's going to continue to be like a lifelong process, you know, like I haven't arrived at some peak where I know how to care well. I just feel like I have the tools that I need now to care. And anytime I feel sort of any dissonance or misalignment, like I just always bring it back to consent and consent with myself, you know, like checking in with my body and my nervous system. Like, yeah. So I really love that you brought this up. And I feel like it's something I'm still chewing on, but those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the idea of like still chewing on something feels very appropriate with respect to this particular question and point. And so thank you for that, because I think there's always a certain kind of approximation that we're moving toward. Antonia, how are you feeling?
Like, I'm feeling all your words. Yeah, the approximation and the lifelong journey, which is going to be a lifelong journey. It's like there is no arrival. Like, now I am really good at this, but yeah, resonating with that of tools. What first came up for me and something that I've been working through is so much of this care work is also labor, and also seeing the care work of like, yeah, that it's woven through everything. Like, and that oftentimes the care work as labor isn't seen as labor. And especially if you're in community or in projects where there's like very material work that's happening, oftentimes the care piece is not, in my experience, hasn't been seen as a laboring piece of that. And that for me, in terms of like that feeling of like, oh, when something feels misaligned, right? Like that checking in with the body, but how much growth and tension is in that when you're like, oh, but I want to be a part of this, but I'm feeling all of this. And how do you communicate with everyone? Like that there's misalignment when things are moving, like people want to come over here, but actually need to take steps back and be like, but there's actually like, we need to work through all this stuff between us and like what's happening here first. And like to step into that role can be so terrifying, because you're in that role of like, that is labor of observing, of processing and listening to what the body is communicating, and then speaking to people, and not in this way of like projecting of like, you're doing this or you're doing that, but like, this is what I'm observing is like, these are realities that I'm seeing and the consequences that this is having in this moment. So I'm in a process right now of like how to communicate that in a way that inspires change and also opens a space to soften and open self-reflection. But also in that space of like feeling that, being able, like within a capitalist economy that we live in, like how can all of this labor also be paid for and recognized and seen as labor, and thinking of like all these gardens that are being started or that I've started, that's just like, I love it and it feels so good and it's just like so aligned, but like it's like, oh, I do this because I love it, and like then what other work is being done to like get those financial needs met. And I think it's so important to keep having these conversations of like that doing liberatory work can also be and should be compensated for. Like we should feel really good about the work that we're doing. It should feel aligned with our bodies and our nervous system.
I love that you bring up the financial piece, because that's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And I personally have had to work really hard. Like I hired a coach and everything to help me explore what it is to actually pay myself for my labor. So like when we're doing a fundraiser for activation, like what percentage of that is going to a director's fee so I can pay my rent, get my food. And I feel blessed that so much of my like glow up and my business's expansion has also contributed to the quality of my life. Because if I'm not well cared for, if my bills aren't paid, if I don't feel good about my living situation, how can I fight white supremacy? How can I be out in these streets if I'm not like adequately cared for? And so I'm really struggling right now. I don't even feel like I can call myself an anti-capitalist anymore. Not because I don't think that, not because I don't believe in it, but because I value money as a resource. And so, yeah, it's something that like I feel like was more talked about, especially like healing money trauma and like what it is like when you reach like your first $100,000, like that's also goal trauma, especially when, you know, let me speak for myself, someone who's come from a poor family and then sort of like shifting into abundance. And I've been actually at the end of last year up until January, February, I was doing some really, really deep abundance work in magic. And I'm starting to sort of see that magic unfold throughout the year. But I also wanted to just mention how much of care work is put on the bodies of non-men in a way that is exploitative. And I will nip that shit in the bud. We're not doing that. We are not doing that. So yeah, I want to have more authentic conversations around money. I want to help people feel good about being wealthy and having access to money. Last year during the pandemic, I started Activation Cooperative Fund. I'm less involved now, but it's basically a fund where people can go and request funds and receive those funds, no strings attached, within 72 hours. So we currently have over 100 members, and I think there's about $4,000 in the fund, and we've funded 15 proposals since last year. So I am that guy that's like, let's get this bread.
I appreciate that. And it makes me think about, you know, like currency money is here, and all of us should actively be thinking about our relationship and working through the relationships that we may have previously had or inherited to money. But I think maybe one thing that I'm trying to kind of work through and hold on to is that, to your point, Camera, if we can acknowledge that it is a resource, like what are the ways that like I choose to use that resource in relation to other people? I can't and I won't posit or position myself as any sort of like economist, Marxist, or socialist scholar. But I think about that in relationship to other folks, like what do I want to be able to do with this resource, both as a way of taking care of myself, but also in practice, can I and how can I redistribute it to other folks so that that possibility is there for them as well. So I think, yes, to both of your points, that we got to talk about money. It's here. And I think oftentimes queer, Black, brown, indigenous folks, like we are on the outside of those power negotiations so much that it is important for us to be able to name what money is doing, when we have it, how we're using it, where it's going. So yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate us kind of lifting and like sifting through that.
Yeah, I also feel like what we're saying and what you were mentioning, Cameron, I love that idea of like that you created this cooperative and the no strings attached of like, when we're able to tap into that money, what can we imagine and like move from out of that space of scarcity. And again, that individualism of like, but this is mine and I worked for this here, of like, yeah, like we need to have our needs met. And what happens when like we are able to have our needs met, how our leadership will also reflect so differently when like we're tending to ourselves and we're tending to our rest. But also what can we imagine with money and like imagining that abundance and that like it's like growing in that way together. And that's definitely one of the tenets with Urban Cura is like, how is everyone getting paid for their labor and like getting paid abundantly in that, you know?
I hope this doesn't feel like too out of a segue, but talking about kind of resources, talking about money, talking about imagination as a essential strategy in liberatory work. What does your liberatory pleasurable terrain look like? And what did it smell like, right? What did it taste like? What does it feel like? What colors are there? Who's there with you? Because for me, I think rest, care, and pathways to liberation, they aren't abstract entities, right? Like we can pull them down. They get to be concrete. And I think both of you all demonstrate that, right? And embody that. So I love to hear some of the textures and like touches and scents that come up for you when you think about ultimately kind of what a liberatory place contains.
I have something.
Go for it.
I was right before coming here. I'm still with the friends that I was with yesterday, and we've just kind of like expanded time. I'm like, okay, the things on the to-do list are really long, but I'm just like leaning into, okay, this is the rest place. And thinking about these questions, I was like, yeah, that liberatory space right now is feeling like phone is off, there is no time, maybe like on mushrooms, and just moving through space so slowly, having the awareness of how I'm moving and how I'm transitioning from one space to another space, and just being in like one area, like not getting into any vehicle or like too drastic shifting, but just being able to be in such presence with where I am, whether that's outside or inside, but just like really seeing everything and opening up my scope of what is externally around me, and then also like what I'm feeling, but having the time and like permission from myself to be in that space. And you know what that smells like, I mentioned the honeysuckles. Maybe this is later in June, so there are roses. There's food that's prepared, maybe some rose infused honey. Maybe the day turns into the, making like a flower essence of a magnolia. I don't know, whatever's there, just like a moment to have these deep moments with a plant or with a person, in silence, in conversation. But those moments when you're like, wait, I don't have anything to do. Like, what am I doing? I'm not being productive enough. And it's like, yo, you just got blessed. Like, this is your moment. This is your moment to just be in that space of like, phone is off. No one is asking anything from you right now. And you are invited to take that invitation from everything that's around us that's speaking so loud, you know, and just in different languages that we don't always understand. So that's what that's feeling like for me.
Thank you for that. That was such beautiful imagery.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like biting on every part of
Mm-hmm.
words. Number one for me is I can't wait till we don't live in a police state. Like I live across the street from a precinct and it's disgusting. So yeah, that's number one. Number two, I can't rest until Palestinians can rest. And so I'm very like, yeah, once that genocide, once we figure out a way to like make that stop, then I can start to like actually be in my liberated space. Thirdly, so you know the smell of like the rain is like coming, but it hasn't like started raining yet in like the pavement and the earth, like that smell, like it literally turns me on. Like that's the vibe. It's mountainous, but the ground is leveled enough for wheelchair users to access the space. There's like instruments everywhere because I'm a musician. I love to jam. Just beautiful Black, brown, indigenous bodies eating fruits from the trees, relaxing, like cacophonous laughter everywhere. There's like a space to like grieve and mourn. And there's a fire. I absolutely love fire. But yeah, we've got some work to do we've got some work to do before I can really rest in that space.
Wow, that I'm really moved. I think the call for abolition, the call for free Palestine, the call for level and horizontal relationship to things that are non-human, right? That like they are also a part of what it means to be in good relation. All of that is also in my liberatory place. So I really want to thank you both for being so explicit in those like in that insistence, excuse me. You know, I have been thinking a lot about the Black geographer, scholar, and abolitionist Ruth Wilson Gilmore. And I'm loosely paraphrasing, but Professor Gilmore talks about abolition as presence, right? As a presence of the resources and infrastructure needed for folks to thrive, and also the absence of the infrastructures that like perpetuate harm. And I think all of what we have been discussing is connected and embedded in that. And so I want to thank you both for one, just being like badass and for kind of, I hope it's okay that I curse. And for reminding me, and I'm sure other folks in this discussion, that to move in a way that's pleasurable, that makes you feel good in the body and spirit, is actually deeply connected to what it means to kind of be always in a kind of radical space of political work too. And so thank you both for that. I mean, immense gratitude for who you are and like what you both reminded us of today. I'm a water sign, so I tend to get emotional. But I'm going to transition us to some questions from the good folks who joined us today. If I might, give me 2 seconds. So fellow comrade Dara Shah, excuse me, is asking, well, first they say, it's so grateful to be hearing from you all. and especially holding on to the framework of consent as grounding frameworks for how you live your life. Dara is curious what other frameworks might ground us in our day-to-day life. And so I will let you both answer that question. I think I just talked about Ruth Wilson Gilmore and trying to practice abolitionism. So that's a framework for me that feels important. But what other frameworks show up for you all?
The first thing that's coming to mind for me is a really like precise and consistent and almost rigorous attention to my mental health. So I'm in therapy as often as I can be, talking to psychiatrists, educating myself on like bipolar and BPD, just so I can be a better resource for those things, as well as like support the people in my life who are living under those conditions. I think the mental health conversation is something that has been more happening as of late. However, I still am experiencing like a collective dissonance around that care for oneself. Like I even, when I talk to some of the members of the co-op fund, they'll say things like, oh, someone needs the money more than me, so I'm not gonna apply. Or, oh, this other person has deeper needs, so I'm not gonna like care for myself. And one of the things that I picked up from someone on Instagram that I follow was that, like, I literally wanted to get this quote tatted because it was so real. They said that your only guaranteed community for the rest of your life is you. And I think that oftentimes when we think about like the collective and community, like the self gets kind of lost, but it's like we are also community. And so, yeah, I just like try my best to show up already centered and loved. That way the people around me don't have to do too much labor to love me, and like that love can just flow really easily. So yeah, just like mental health is like a central point of self-care, and then like working from there has been really grounding for me.
Love that. Thank you. Frameworks. Yeah, resonating with that so much, of the like caring for oneself and what are the rituals that occur daily to check in with oneself. And I think that can look differently for each person. So also resonating with just like, yeah, this doing somatics therapy has been so helpful for me to have these moments of checking in with myself. How am I doing? Where am I feeling that? And moving through that and coming, like, I love what you said, Camera, of like loving ourselves so deeply so that we're not seeking that in from other people and that validation, which I think is something that I'm personally working on a lot right now, like the need to be recognized for the work that we're doing, which can be so much, and just like, no one's seeing what I'm doing so much, and just like going back to that why, you know, like where is that coming from? So having these moments to like just check in and be like, what am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? So I think that's a framework that I'm like need to grow in a lot, of just like the no and the yes, and then like let me take the moment to think about that, and having more patience, because I think they're in that space of like urgency, and that there's so much to do. It can be like, yes, I want to help you, yes, like all of that sounds so exciting that I'm like, whoa, I said yes to way too many things that are all amazing, but now like I'm gonna do them all and I'm exhausted, and like which one of those am I not actually gonna follow through to the degree that would feel like that was that I feel like I showed up in the fullest way that feels aligned with me. So I think having the framework of just like taking a moment of pause before we commit to something, and or if we've already committed to something, to say like, actually, I'm not going to be able to follow through with what I committed to. Another piece that has been so helpful is moving out of the language of expectation and to responsibility, of like, this is what I'm responsible for, and this is what I am consensually committing to. And if someone has an expectation that they haven't communicated, that's on them. Like, I'm never going to meet that expectation. Like, sorry, like, that's not for me to work through, because I never was aware that that was an expectation that you had. So like shifting out of expectation, like both person, like what expectations am I holding of other people, and how is that impacting me? Of like, I'm expecting this other person to like work the same time that I'm working. Like, if that hasn't been communicated, that's just dishonoring mostly just myself, you know, and like, but also how does that play out in my relationship with other people? So yeah, I think the consensual piece of like expectation versus responsibility is really important.
Thank you. Joel is wondering if there are any thoughts on redistribution and restitution within the context of care and care economy.
Is there like a more specific, like, wondering?
I don't think so. Joel, if you have any more specific points in that question, can you drop them for us in the chat? I can see the comments. I think the way I interpreted that question on the first read, it made me actually think about the way that I'm learning from Black anarchists, thinking about mutual aid, which I feel like in the past year, as you both know, has experienced a very a kind of robust insertion into the mainstream. But I think a lot about how that practice, perhaps even outside of the formal turn of anarchism, has existed in my understanding within kind of Black communities, particularly for so long. I think a lot about Fannie Lou Hamer and the Freedom Farm as an example, and kind of the like history of the susu as a way of caretaking. But the element of restitution, I too would love to hear a more specific note about. So if you want to drop it in, Joel, feel free. While we wait to hear a further point from you, I want to bring up a question from Fahad, who asked, how has our relationship with money changed through time? What was it like growing up, and what is it now? And how has that transformation been supported?
So I grew up to two Black Muslim people who had me at 19 years old, and they worked tirelessly to give me the best life that they could. But I also have 5 other siblings, and so scarcity was something that we always sort of grappled with. So it's like, yeah, we have a 5-bedroom house, but we have no furniture. Or now we're living in like a 2-bedroom apartment, and my mom is like working nights, and I'm like taking care of, you know, my 5 siblings. So I've been working since 15 years old because I had to like contribute to the house and like pay for my prom dress and like do all the things that I wanted to do growing up. And I was also conned into higher education. So now I have $160,000 in student loan debt, which I'm not paying back because like for obvious reasons. And I think within the last year of losing I've also like really struggled to keep a job. So I would get fired for being too vocal, or like I would just have a mental health breakdown because I couldn't stand the circumstances of the job. And after my last job that I got not fired, but let go of because of the pandemic, I started to like really pump like all of my energy, love, and care into activation. And I've also started to demand that folks fund my work. Like, it's not a matter of like, oh, can you please no, you need to invest. Like, this is not, you just need to invest. And so we did 2 really big campaigns last year. Both of them were really successful. We've been receiving some foundation grants as well. And I incorporated the business as an LLC. And so now I'm like accountable to my my accountant, and like through that accountability have just created a deeper responsibility to my finances. So for example, like one of my boundaries with myself is like, I don't let my checking account go below a certain number. I'm investing some of my money in Robinhood so that I can redistribute some of those funds. Anytime we get like a foundation grant, a percentage of that goes to our comrades and allies. Like we're doing a commercial partnership right now, and we're gonna redistribute some of those funds that we're getting to Palestinian organizations. I'm also interested in like cultivating deeper relationship with people that I'm investing in, because there's this thing that's happening in America where we're just throwing money at the problem and we're not really like invested in the lives on the ground. And so I want to figure out a way that I can like be in relationship with Palestinians and like really understand like their financial needs as well as their needs beyond finances, because while money is a very valuable resource and it goes so deep, I don't want to be the kind of philanthropist that is just throwing money at people without like knowing who people are and like developing an actual relationship like grounded in solidarity. So that's where I'm at now. When I can afford it, I seek financial counseling to help me be responsible to my money. But it's been like a 365 days of just transformation. And I went from like last year asking my mom to like Venmo me $30 for dinner to like being able to pay my own rent. So it's been a huge shift. And it is one of the things that I'm just so grateful for financial stability.
Do we have time to keep going? Cool. So I grew up in a household, middle class household, where my parents, they had come here as immigrants with nothing and worked to get to this position as math professors. But their story of what they went through coming here was like very at the forefront of how we were raised, my brother and I. That like everything that we had was like worked for, and that it wasn't something that was like just a given. So I started working also like pretty young age at 11. And also what they were making very clear to me, like as a first generation Latinx femme, like that I was always like gonna be, not taken to the same regard as someone that was born in this country or a white man. And so I think that kind of that storytelling really pushed like kind of this urgency of like, I need to like work extra hard and, make money to like support myself. And also like that, like what is the standard of life that I want to have or to keep, so but at the same time, I think having grown up in a middle class family that was also like a very political household around social justice, like that space of like, oh, but like I have and others don't have was also like a big story for me. And like feeling that guilt around that of like, oh, but like, my friends are in this debt and like I'm not in this debt. And like that, those feelings like really important to have around like how am I, in that relationship of supporting, but like also supporting myself of like that space of like feeling guilty of like what I was born into. And like that also doesn't help move, like shift the issue. So I feel like for me, that space of like, am I, after doing my taxes, I was like, oh wow, I'm like below the poverty line right now, like, but also feeling abundant because I don't have debt and I don't have these, like financially, I'm okay in that way. But in terms of, how I'm building up Urban Cura is really focused on that abundance and redistributing what's coming in. So like this year so far, we've redistributed almost $10,000 to different organizations. And so making sure that that's at the forefront, and like after about 5 years of doing this work and like being able to have the ability to go to my parents and not have to pay rent to build this out, and feeling like, wow, that's such an immense privilege, and like I can afford to not have to work another job to build this up. So like, how am I using this privilege and the situation that I'm in to like build out something that I really, care for, that can support others, and then also support me so that like I can keep doing this work.
I also just want to thank Deem Journal for paying us for this, because when I tell you that makes me feel so deeply held, and like I just no longer accept work that I don't get paid for. So I really, really appreciated that.
Likewise. And I think, when your material needs are met, you can rest, you can like move more slowly, right? That the material intervention does enable a different type of relationship to all of these systems that we've been talking about, right? Cameron, I think it was you who articulated so beautifully, like, if I am not well, spiritually, mentally, and materially, like I can't advocate, and that can't be overstated actually enough. And so this final question, thanks Fahad, that was a really important question. And our final question comes from Jasmine. Hi, Jasmine. And it's specific for you, Cameron. Jasmine asked, you mentioned your experience with consent and boundary coaching and financial abundance coaching. Can you discuss further how those experiences have informed the rates you set for yourself?
Can you repeat the last part? Inform the what?
Informed the rates you set for yourself.
Oh, that is a great question. Honestly, you just learn from your friends and the people around you. Like for example, I brought a photographer on for a photo shoot I did, and I was just seeing the way that their agent was like negotiating, and they were like, actually, it's going to be 5K. We're not doing this for 3K. And I was like, oh, okay. So I can definitely get a lot more expensive. And I think it's a matter of the fact that like reparations are due, and like Black people and our labor like has been undervalued since the beginning of time. And so I have no problem asking someone to pay me an additional X amount of money, because if they don't, then like it just wasn't meant for me. And so I think like at this point, because of the work that I've done, and because I value my own work, like I'm really bold with my rate. Like I'm not gonna lie. And I feel weird saying this, and I don't know if this is something that I should be saying out loud, but I do it because I can. Like I set my rate.
You can say that. I think you can say that out loud.
Yeah, it's just, no more of that. Like, ooh, but I don't know. But what if? But no, we're not doing that. That's a great question. I really appreciated it.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that question, Jasmine. And I didn't hear, or I don't see anything from Joel with respect to their original question. So I'm going to use this as a moment to close the loop, and bring us to a nice conclusion, and to just extend again much gratitude to both of you all. This is, I cannot express enough how wonderful it has been to kind of think through these big questions with you all, and to walk away with some really, for me personally, tangible points of entry into other inquiries and investigations. So thanks. This has been really lovely. And a big gratitude to Alice, New, and Isabel as well, for inviting us into this conversation and for caring for us in a way that also acknowledges this as work, and that compensation. It's really, it means a lot actually. And so unless you all, Antonia and Camera, have any final words, I'm gonna turn it back over to the Deem team. I think that's what's happening. Yes, okay.
So yeah, thank you so much. This was such an enriching conversation. I don't know how I'm in LA, so I don't know how I'm gonna go through the rest of my day with all this energy that I have, but I'm sure I'll figure it out. So I want to thank everyone for viewing and joining our first session. We have 2 more sessions that we're really excited about, in which on the 3rd, June 3rd, we are tackling the topic of respect, which is very much connected to everything we spoke about today. And then on the 10th, we are talking about reciprocity and what does that start to look like. So please, everyone, feel free to join us again. We will be announcing the RSVP links very shortly, but also a slight plug. If you haven't read the current issue of Deem Journal, we have actually the Urban Cuda piece up on our site right now for you to go check out. And then there's going to be an amazing follow-up piece this month, Activation Residency. So this is all coming together. So please, if you have not had the opportunity or you have not got enough of Camera and Antonia, please head over to our site and read those pieces. Can you quickly, well, at the end, we're going to flash how to reach you via your social handles. But if there's anything else that anybody wants to plug or any closing remarks, definitely, this is your time.
Yes, actually, I do. There's going to be an amazing knowledge share happening this Saturday from 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's being facilitated by Dr. Claudia Ford, who's a Black herbalist midwife and professor, and she's going to be speaking about cotton and the ancestral history, African history of cotton, the colonial and enslaved history of cotton. And also how cotton was used as a way of survival and resilience by enslaved peoples. And so that's going to be a really powerful knowledge share, and there are BIPOC scholarships available. So if folks are interested in that, that's happening this Saturday.
Awesome.
I just wanted to thank Jess for holding us so well. I don't really have anything I want to plug at this time. We do have some really beautiful Pride campaigns dropping in June, so just look out for those. And we just look forward to continuing to be part of the conversation and the culture.
Cool. Jess, anything from you or?
I have nothing. I'm just thankful. I'm on the internet. I'm around.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for viewing. Thank you, Jess, Antonia, and Camera for providing so much inspiration, wisdom, and just openness and vulnerability. And we will be talking to everyone soon. See you June 3rd. Bye.
Bye for now.